Hey guys, Richard Aficionado channel and Reefs.com, and we're coming from you live from Reef-A-Palooza, New York 2021. And it has been an amazing show. And today I decided to visit my good friend Chad Clayton, also known as Copagat, at Reef Nutrition's booth. Chad, how are you, man?
I'm doing well. It's awesome to be back in the show scene, and it's been a great turnout so far. And yeah, it's always good to see you. It's always a pleasure.
Likewise, sir. You know, what's been very interesting to me is a lot of different uses of rotifers.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I had a little bit of algae in my tank, and my good friend Shane, who isn't here by the way, of 24/7 Aquariums, told me that I should maybe dose a little bit of rotifers in my tank. What do you think about that, Chad?
You know, rotifers are an amazing little animal. They're primarily used in aquaculture. So those of you that have captive bred clownfish in your tank, those little baby clownfish were fed rotifers early on in their life.
Food. Right.
Yeah, and so that was the live feed organism of choice for breeders, and rotifers are actually very popular in aquaculture in general. They're very good at eating algae, suspended algae. Not the kind of algae that grows on the glass and the rocks, but like an algae bloom that's suspended in the water column.
Right, right.
And they can eat a lot of algae really fast, and they replicate themselves very fast. They can double their density in 24 hours.
Yeah.
So in the right situation, you know, if you turned all your pumps off and dumped in 1 million rotifers into your system, it's likely that they would consume all that phytoplankton in a day or two. And
right.
It'd be quite remarkable, and you wouldn't need to use a UV unit.
Right. And what's also very cool thing about this, after they consume all the algae and such, they have all that, you know, gut loaded of algae, they also get consumed by corals. Yep. So nothing goes to waste. And biodiversity is so important in your aquarium. I mean, in the end, we are trying to mimic the ocean.
Yeah,
so
do our best.
Including putting different stuff in our aquarium that mimics that. And I think that's a very important thing to do. So you guys may be wondering, what is this bucket here in the middle of the screen here? And Chad's gonna go over what this contraption is.
So this is what we call our compact culture system. It's, you know, a garden variety 5-gallon bucket, food grade bucket.
Yes.
And this is primarily what people use to culture rotifers in, a 5-gallon bucket. You can produce millions of rotifers a day out of a 5-gallon bucket. And in fact, we sell 2 kinds of rotifers, an L-type and an S-type. And all of our S-type rotifers that we culture at our farm, we use just 5-gallon buckets.
That's crazy.
Yeah, and so
you would think that it would be a little bit more fancy, you know, like.
Yeah, and it's great because buckets, you know, you can move them around. They have handles. You know, you don't need a lot of space. You can put them in closets. You know, rotifers don't need light to grow, so you know, and they're easy to move around and easy to clean and disinfect. And who doesn't have buckets in this industry anyway, right?
Right, right.
So,
how well do they do in the temperature fluctuations? Like, are they tolerant?
Yeah, rotifers are actually very hardy organisms. They can tolerate a wide range of salinities. They can tolerate a wide range of temperatures. And I'm not going to be distracted by that guy that just did that.
Yes.
But yeah, so if there are any temperature fluctuations, all it does is it affects their metabolism, their growth rate, and their reproductive rate. So the colder the culture, the slower they're moving, the slower they're reproducing, and they're not eating as much algae. The hotter the culture gets, they're really raging, they're amped up, they're eating a lot of algae, and they're reproducing themselves. And what's interesting about rotifers is one of their modes of reproduction is what we call asexual reproduction, and they're all females when they're happy and healthy, and the water quality is good, and they're just cloning themselves, which is remarkable. So yeah, that's one of the reasons why we like them in aquaculture, because they're very hardy and they reproduce themselves asexually, and just, you know, it's pretty awesome. So
earlier you mentioned that you have 2 different types. There's an L species and an S species. So
it's an L-type and an S-type, and they're both different species of rotifer.
Right. And then what are the differences between the 2?
So well, wait.
I'm telling you, man. Oh, he's right there. That's just out of spite now.
He was looking right at us. Come on, Greg.
He was looking right at us when he did that. Greg.
Somebody hit him over the head.
You looked at me when you did it.
Put that on the bloopers. As far as the two species that we have, the primary difference is size. So the S type means small, S means small,
gotcha.
L means large.
Yeah.
And so people that are using the L type, the large type rotifer, are using it for clownfish larvae and a lot of other marine ornamentals, and even freshwater fish. People that are breeding like Danny O'Reilly zebrafish. And then the S type is for people that are working with smaller gape larval fish, so very small larval fish. Primarily like food fish species, and where they need a smaller live feed organism.
Gotcha, gotcha. Now, what kind of additional benefits can rotifer provide for your system?
So as far as feeding rotifers to a reef tank, some of the benefits are that you're feeding phytoplankton, which is incredibly nutritious, and you're feeding a variety of phytoplankton species to your rotifer. So the rotifer consumes the phytoplankton, it digests it, it accumulates it, and it assimilates it into its body and its gut and its tissue. And so all of that good nutrition from the phytoplankton gets into the rotifer, and then when a coral or sometimes fish eat rotifers, they gain all that nutrition from the phytoplankton. So it's a great way to deliver phytoplankton to these organisms that wouldn't normally consume phytoplankton because it's just too small.
Right, right.
Or they're not set up to feed that way.
Gotcha.
So yeah, and it's really cool to feed a live feed organism to your corals. Whether it's SPS or LPS corals, they both the rotifer is small enough that an SPS coral, an acro, one of those, will consume it no problem. Potential benefit is that rotifers are filter feeders,
right?
And they tend to attach to surfaces. They actually have a foot that looks like a tail, and they excrete an adhesive out of the foot, and they like to attach to surfaces when there's not a lot of current. So a refugium is a good place for them. And as the water flows past them, as particles of phytoplankton and bacteria and things like that flow past them, they will consume it. So there's potential that rotifers could live in a refugium as long as they have enough food to live down there, because they're constantly eating and they need a lot of food to reproduce themselves.
I'm almost thinking that they could even attach themselves to like any kind of like a ceramic materials in the sump and consume all the detritus that may be going there, right?
Yeah, I mean, as long as you can, I don't know, it's kind of tricky because as soon as there's a lot of current or they detach,
yeah,
they can potentially get killed by the pump, or they just get pumped up into the display and then they get eaten. So it'd be interesting to see somebody do something like this, is introduce rotifers into a refugium and then maybe take samples from the refugium, from the waste and things like that, and look at them under a microscope. It's something I'm very much interested in.
And let's learn a little bit more. The filtration, I have actually seen the previous model to this, I believe, where it was like a T-line almost.
Yeah, like a T-fitting, yeah.
T-fitting,
yeah.
And then one thing I noticed differently that you'll see in the B-roll here is they have a hang-on-bag filter.
So we grow a lot of phytoplankton, we grow live feed organisms for aquaculture, and we had a lot of clownfish breeders that reached out to us and had a lot of questions on how to culture rotifers, how to keep a rotifer culture clean. And over the years, we came up with different ways to help them, kind of provide an all-in-one system for them to culture the rotifers, harvest the rotifers, feed and enrich them, and then feed those rotifers to their animals, whether it's larval fish or corals. And so what we have here is a filter called the RotiClean filter. It is an invention from my friend Ben Roman with Atomic Aquaculture. He's a really good guy and he likes to tinker with things, and we over the years came up with this filter and had it tested by clownfish breeders on rotifers to see if the rotifers survive the filter and if you could continue to culture them at high density. And so it's just a simple filter that you plug it in, it's got a little pump, it's just like any hang-on-the-back filter you would find in the aquarium trade, and it's got a little filter insert in here with some white material that we call filter floss, and that floss accumulates organic waste. And people use filter floss in aquariums and
all the time.
It accumulates the organic waste and the rotifer poo that's produced in the bucket, because rotifers produce a lot of waste. And to keep a rotifer culture healthy and clean, you just gotta, you gotta remove that waste. And we do things like protein skimmers and filter floss in our aquariums to export waste. And so this is just a waste export mechanism to keep the culture clean.
And I also imagine, just like any other hang-on-bag filter, additional benefit to this will be providing oxygen because of the water surface agitation, right?
Yes, absolutely. So yeah, the other benefits are it provides oxygenation because the water's falling out of the hang-on-the-back filter into the bucket. And it also keeps everything nice and suspended and homogenized. It keeps the rotifers suspended, it keeps the phytoplankton suspended. The rotifers do get pulled up into the pump, into the filter. They pass right through the filter because they have kind of squishy bodies. They don't have rigid appendages or anything like that.
Okay.
And they don't hold on to things like, you know, a copepod would, or you know, any other kind of crustacean. And so when the filter gets clogged, they just pass around it. And they just keep tumbling around in the culture, and it's also a great way to feed the culture is you add the phytoplankton to the filter housing, and it helps disperse the phytoplankton into the culture and kind of, you know, evenly disperse it throughout the culture, because our phytoplankton, the RG Complete, is very dense stuff, and we always recommend that people stir it and mix it before they add it to anything, because it will just sink to the bottom because it's very thick.
Right, right. When you mentioned earlier that rotifers make a lot of mess, right? Now, how important is water quality for rotifers? Are they forgiving as it comes to like dirty water, or do they need to be in pristine condition water?
Yeah, so they are very forgiving. They can handle, you know, ammonia. They can handle low dissolved oxygen. Now, those things that they can tolerate those things, but and it doesn't kill them, but it does affect their reproductive rates. And so they're less likely to reproduce as quickly as you'd like them to if the water quality is poor, you know. And so this filter, along with doing harvests, you know, you're going to harvest the rotifers, and that thins the population. It also keeps the animals young and vigorous. And then you're essentially doing a water change. You're harvesting a percentage, and then you're putting clean salt water back. It's just like we do a water change on our aquariums.
So it applies here too. Solution to pollution is dilution.
Exactly, yes.
Gotcha.
And also consistency. You don't want to get lazy, like with our reef tanks. You don't want to get lazy with a rotifer culture, because if you're not exporting the waste, if you're not doing water changes, you can imagine what's happening. Ammonia is building up, dissolved oxygen is dropping, the pH is changing. It's incredibly stressful on the animals, and then there's that tipping point where everything just starts to die. And then it just gets worse and worse and worse until it's a giant stink bomb in your house.
Gotcha. These are like a sustainable, as long as you take care of them, they pretty much last forever.
Right, it's what we call a continuous culture in aquaculture. So you're harvesting a percentage, you're replenishing with clean water, the rotifers are still in there, they reproduce very rapidly, they can double their density in 24 hours, and so it's a continuous culture. The rotifers will be there the next day, as long as you're feeding them properly and doing these water changes.
So now when we mentioned about water changes and stuff like that, you know, like the water changes typically we do with the hose and such, these are such a small creatures. How do we catch, because we don't want to waste all the rotifers when we're putting the water out, how do we catch them? How do we not waste them? Right,
so basically what a hobbyist would do, or a person in aquaculture, is you have a container that you can dip the water out of, and we've got this sieve. It's a 41 micron screen. Okay. And so what this does is it captures the rotifers and allows all the water to fall through. And so what you're doing is you're removing a portion of this, and you know, this container is going to be in another container, so you're not spilling water everywhere. Or you can do it near a sink. And so what you're doing is you're removing the water, pouring it through until you've removed enough water, you know, 25% of the culture. And then you take the rotifers and you can, you know, feed them to your larval fish, or you can disperse them into your reef tank. Yeah. And you know, then you do that the next day. You rinse and repeat kind of thing. And one thing you don't want to do is you don't want to turn off the pump or any supplemental aeration that you have in the bucket. Definitely you want the culture to be homogenized, evenly dispersed. Because if you turn that pump off and let this bucket go, you know, let the bucket go calm, so to speak, the rotifers will accumulate at the surface. So when you go to harvest, you're basically wiping out your culture. You're harvesting like 90% potentially. Yeah. And then the next day you're like, why aren't there as many rotifers in there? Earlier on you mentioned feeding rotifers with phytoplankton. Now, what would you recommend for people that's just getting into this? What kind of food is good for them? Live culture, you know, or you know, like viable culture that's not live? Which one would you recommend? Which is the easiest? So yeah, our top product that a lot of hobbyists use that are getting into rotifer culture, or even some clownfish breeders that are running low scale, you know, operations where they only have a few breeding pairs. They don't need a lot of rotifers. They're using our RG Complete. So this algae there's multiple species of phytoplankton in this product. It's very concentrated, and one thing to note is the algae is not alive. Rotifers don't need to be fed live algae. Yeah. Luckily, it's a fantastic thing about one of the really cool things about them. And so the algae in this product gets consumed by the rotifers. You're feeding this food a couple of times a day. The best way to feed a rotifer culture is small amounts, multiple times a day. We actually have feed dosers that dose food to our rotifer cultures 24 hours a day, you know, every day of the week, every week of the year. And so for those of you that can't set up a doser, auto-dosing system, it's beneficial to just feed small amounts every day. And a starting dose would be like 6 milliliters a day. And we provide a transfer pipette that has graduations for measuring the food. And so it's a 3 milliliter transfer pipette. And so you would basically fill it up to the 3 milliliter line, dose the food into the filter, and then you would feed the rotifers. Then you would come back later in the day and do that same exact thing.
Gotcha.
And so if you wanted more rotifers in your culture, you would simply start adding more algae. You would add maybe a third feeding or add 4 milliliters per feeding. And then that way you can produce more rotifers. You can produce a lot of rotifers in this system. 11 milliliters of this fed every day will produce 1 million rotifers at a 25% harvest rate. That's a lot of rotifers for somebody that's just feeding a reef tank or larval fish. So
gotcha.
It can be very productive.
Right. So if they want to get started with this, how do they get it? How much does it cost?
Right, so we have the clownfish breeder pack that's on our website. It encompasses the filter and the sieve and the algae and our green water feed. So this is for people that are breeding clownfish. So the prices are actually listed on our website. We actually have a number of different kits. We have like a rotifer starter kit, and then you can buy things individually, like you can buy the filter and the screen and the food and just the rotifers individually. And we ship it FedEx, second day delivery. We use cold packs to keep the rotifers very cold. They can tolerate low temperatures, and it helps us to ship them that way. And then you're off and running. And we have a lot of information on our website on how to culture rotifers. And in fact, I've just created a page on our website that we're going to release very soon. We're calling it Clownfish 101. And it's kind of all of the questions that we've accumulated over the years,
right,
on this page. And so it's kind of it's segmented by like rotifer culture. What's a rotifer? How to culture them? Do I need rotifers? Brood stock. How to set up clownfish brood stock? How to raise the larvae? How to hatch the embryos in a larva rearing tank? How to feed rotifers in a larva rearing tank? And how to wean your clownfish off of rotifers onto a dry feed like TDO. And all the things in between, and also advice on, what to do with the clownfish when you've grown them up. You gotta have a plan. If you're gonna raise fish, you better have a home for them down the line.
For sure,
especially
definitely.
if you're successful.
Yes.
Because a successful batch could mean 300 clownfish.
Right.
So what are you gonna do with those, right? You trade them with your friends, sell them to your pet store, or give them to people.
Wow, I had learned so much about rotifers. Honestly, I didn't think much of it. I'm glad that my friend Shane has turned my attention to this product here, and I look forward to incorporating this into my system. If you already have a rotifer system set up in your system, please comment below and let me know what you think, and share your experience with us and how it has maybe affected your reef aquarium. I'm really interested in finding out how it has worked for everybody. So many people were wanting to try their hand in this because so many of us are experiencing this in our home aquarium.
Yep,
for me, my tank, my clowns, like they lay eggs every other week. So a lot of times people want to catch and do something like this. Yep. So I think that would be a cool thing, a pet project that people may want to get into if they're still home from COVID or anything like that in general.
Absolutely.
Yes. And it's a fun project.
Yep.
For the kids and everything. So Chad, once again, thank you so much for everything. I hope you have a great show, and thank you so much once again for taking your time to explain everything to me.
You're welcome. It was great being on the show.